How good, Sophie, are you at taking compliments? Because you've got a lot coming.
I'm not great at it, but I think there is an art, isn't there, in just saying thank you very much and just like taking it. We did a little screening when it came on telly the other day, and my cousin, because I just kept being, oh, thanks, right, off with Bob now, My cousin jumped up and did a speech and said, stop being so bloody humble, you've done really well. So I think sometimes it's good to just get over that, isn't it, a bit? And I think women are worse at it, aren't they?
Totally. I think women are worse at it. I think working class people are worse at it. And I think the fact that you and I aren't face to face is going to make it a lot easier because yeah, I mean, I'm terrible at it. I probably don't get as many as you've got in the last 24 hours, but my answer tends to be, oh, shut up, it was rubbish.
Yeah.
It's that same thing as if you buy something and someone says, that looks nice. I always feel the need to say, oh, I bought it in a charity shop.
Louisa Milan has a whole bit, doesn't she, on a woman being complimented for her dress and then her going, oh my God, well, it's not even nice. I'm going to look like shit. There's a whole bit. And I thought, that's so accurate.
Yeah.
It's so true, isn't it? It's just a really weird thing. It's like confidence is not something that we're allowed to have. It seems as arrogant,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Now, Alma's Not Normal. People will be able to watch that when they're listening to this because it was released last night on the Beeb and on the iPlayer in its entirety. Yeah. Your pilot won a BAFTA, which is pretty unusual. So tell me, how much pressure did that put on you?
Well, I only found out about the BAFTA when we were already filming Alma. Yeah, it was the second day of filming and I got the nomination. My grandma had actually passed away the night before. So on the second day of filming, my grandma passed away. I got up in the morning, went into makeup. I got all these messages saying you've been nominated for a BAFTA. So it was just bizarre. Then 4 weeks later, which is 4 weeks into the shoot, we had 2 weeks left to go, is the night I won the BAFTA. So it was fabulous because it gave the whole sort of set and crew and everything just a big lift before the end, But yeah, I mean, it was absolutely baffling. I was not expecting it at all.
Well, it was watch out, compliments coming. It was certainly well deserved. And this first series, Sophie, what an amazing job you've done. It is totally brilliant. And I say that as someone who grew up working class and grew up around addiction. And I think it's absolutely spot on.
Thank you. Thank you. You see, there we go.
Hey, can we talk about that name, Alma's Not Normal? I'm guessing there is a certain level of irony in that, given normal is a kind of flexible word. Yeah. What is normal? Who does grow up in a normal family?
Well, I think that's the irony for me with Alma's Not Normal, because actually it's very normal, isn't it? Most people have quite chaotic family setups, or there's some trauma, there's some stuff there, isn't there? So I think I wanted to kind of play with that as an idea. But then also they have, I think all the female characters in it tend to have this otherworld quality where they just don't quite fit in with what is considered normal to where they're from, and they're all very larger than life. They're like the big peacock in the room, you know what I mean? But there's 4 big peacocks in the room. So, and just playing with that idea of normal has always been something I've found interesting because I've always felt outside of, what is normal really, or considered normal. Yeah.
I've met some people over the years that have issues, I would say. I don't mean direct mental health issues, but I mean, hang-ups or whatever. And then I meet their parents and I think, God, where did your hang-ups come from? Because your parents seem well normal.
Yeah.
I can remember having a flatmate who, she was just terrible. She was just so depressed about not having a boyfriend. And it was because her parents had a happy marriage.
That's interesting. So it's a problem either way, then, isn't it?
Exactly that, because I always assumed it was you had trouble when your parents had a sort of a fucked up marriage. But to meet someone who was like, hang on, your parents were so happy it's ruined your love life. It's a really rare way to look at it.
Yeah. I suppose there's always stuff, isn't there? It's like that poem that's in Alma. They fuck you up, your mum and dad.
Yeah.
Philip Larkin. They may not mean to, but they do. It's unfortunately the case for everybody, isn't it? It's mad, really. Yeah.
Tolstoy says something, I think, about how happy families are all the same, but unhappy families are all unhappy in their own way. Which is much the same effect, but not as funny and doesn't rhyme. I've mentioned this word a couple of times now, working class. I would like to applaud you for writing something and putting working class issues at the forefront of your writing, and obviously that comes from your background. And as a working class person, hooray.
Oh,
It's just amazing to see it. But I kind of, every time I see an interview with you by someone who I'm guessing, you know, having been in the media myself, I'm guessing probably
mm,
was middle class, or a middle class
yeah.
person interviewed you. What's that like? Do you feel like you're becoming slightly, you know, the voice of the working class, which is a ludicrous thing to say, obviously, because working class people don't have a singular experience.
I know that I've always struggled with that. So I did a show in Edinburgh, Branded, in 2017, and it was about identity labeling and stuff. And I picked Northern female working class, and basically spent the hour breaking down each one of those and why I fit that narrative, and also why I don't fit that narrative, and how singular those narratives are. Particularly when you've got Oxbridge people telling you how working class you are.
Yeah.
It's something I've always struggled with a bit. You know, it's kind of this idea of what class means, and the idea of what the North is as well. You know,
Yeah.
everybody's got an idea of the North, and class very much the same, like it's out of a kitchen sink drama before Thatcher or something. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? So,
absolutely.
yes, I do struggle with that. I mean, also just let people crack on with it. But for me, I think these labels can be very intense, and they're just easy for other people to digest you, but they don't actually fit the full human being, do they? They can be quite singular. Yeah, like you say. And especially when it's particular sort of Oxbridgey types who are deciding you're the voice of the North or the voice of the working class, or, you know, it's a female comedian. And that's another one, isn't it? So then suddenly you have to represent now all of women in comedy, you know.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. Because I can remember you saying about, you know, northern and working class experience. A couple of years ago, it's back when we were still an online magazine. Somebody in the Times wrote a column about going to Leeds for the day, and it was the
Yeah.
most hilarious thing I'd ever read in my life. It was
Oh
like
my God, I remember that.
it's like they'd gone to a zoo or something. They were like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
can't believe this place exists."
Like a northern working class safari, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was bizarre that. I remember that woman. Yeah, because I remember thinking, God, has she any idea? And it was only a few years ago, wasn't it? It wasn't a
yeah,
long time ago.
yeah. I
Like
would say
literally two,
maybe
3 years. Yeah.
yeah, it's one thing to think it. It's another thing to write it down and have it published in the
Yeah.
newspaper. This look at me, look how ignorant I am. I've already written off half of the country.
That's why I wanted to show that in Alma. You know, they're not. I had to joke in my stand-up. You know, we're all eating hummus now, and we know how to spell it. You know, don't worry about us. We're not in a cave trying to make fire. Like, things have progressed. So I think there's just something about wanting to represent that on screen as well. You know, that just it's a bit more fluid than people think it is, and actually it can be quite a cosmopolitan place, the North, can't it? And working class
Yeah,
people are more diverse and different than you might expect, and, you know, educated. You know,
yeah,
Alma's grandma is into psychology. You know, you see her books. You know, the what is it, the power of the orgasm or whatever. She's clearly doing her own thing as a working class woman. This idea that you have to fit one singular experience and be one type of person. I think for me, I wanted to completely break down.
Now, talking of Alma's grandma, that is the
Yeah,
amazing Lorraine Ashbourne. And you also have
yeah.
the tremendous Siobhan Finneran, who is playing Alma's mum, Lynn. I mean, how delighted were you when you got those two? And tell me about what it was like working with them.
They're just fabulous. I mean, you know, both of them were, you know, an offer only. So there's a risk there as well, isn't there? Because you give them an offer, you don't know if they'll interpret the character how you see the character.
Mm.
But as soon as they got the scripts, I mean, they were just incredible. I sat with Siobhan before we went to screen and just talked to her about the drama triangle, which is kind of like a social dynamic that plays out in society sometimes, but also in families. There's the rescuer, the victim, and the persecutor. And everybody's fighting for the role of victim or rescuer. And it plays out in a family dynamic that's unhealthy. So I broke that down to Siobhan and talked to her about Lynn's kind of victim/persecutor thing going on. Did that with her for a day. She didn't act any scenes out. Then she went, right, okay, I'll see you on set, sort of thing. Just kind of talked through the psychology of the character. The next day she turns up on set and she just completely is in character. You know, she just completely got this woman. It's like she embodied her spirit or something. I mean, it was amazing. Same with Lorraine. I mean, they both just took to it so well, and they've been so supportive with me. You know, really, really supportive. And, really positive and passionate to be there. It's been fabulous, really. I've been very lucky.
I don't know how Siobhan Finneran talks with those teeth in her mouth. It's quite the
Yeah,
achievement. It looks
yeah.
really uncomfortable, but it is an excellent gag.
Well, I think that gets her into character because as soon as she puts them in, she just morphs into Lynn then.
You've got quite a few other top women in there, including a couple that we know. Jade Adams, obviously, who is brilliant.
Yeah.
And Tanya Moore is in there briefly,
Yeah.
who is also
Yeah.
tremendous. You and Jade, I'm guessing, are friends from the circuit.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I've known Jade for years, so I kind of wrote it with her in mind, that character.
I thought that might be the case.
It's absolutely brilliant, yeah.
Can we talk about sex work? And I know that's going to cause... Maybe I should start by saying I find the whole debate about sex work absolutely exhausting.
Yeah.
So we don't need to go into that. But what I do want to say is I think that you're a very valuable voice in this because of two things that aren't going on particularly in this debate at the moment is number one, you know what you're talking about. And number two, you bring some really vital nuance. There's a brilliant conversation in this between Jade's character and Alma about Alma having had a bad day at work and trying to make the point that when you have a bad day at work and what you do is a job that people judge you for, they use it as an excuse to sweep in. And I would say it's probably the same if you're in a relationship with someone that people don't like, that they use it as a chance to seize on it and say, well, this is why you shouldn't be doing it. And Alma says you should just be able to have a bad day. And I think the nuance there is incredible. I mean, we don't, like I say, we don't have to go into the conversation about whether sex work is work and that whole nasty debate that rages. But I'm guessing you also feel like there should be more nuance in this conversation.
Just wanted to present both sides of the argument and not give a solidified opinion as well. Leanne is actually quite judgmental. Alma is actually quite deluded. So they're both in the wrong, you could say.
Yeah.
But also each of them have really valid points. Leanne brings up the fact that, she's had a difficult childhood. The stats of people that occur experience that are escorts is crazy. So that is a fact. There's a truth in that. Then on the other side of it, well, actually, why does everybody feel that they have the right to psychoanalyse sex workers? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And actually, why do we politicise sex workers in such a way? So I think I just wanted to present both sides of the argument with nuance because I feel that both arguments are valid, actually, as somebody who knows that industry. I still think both are valid. And I wanted to present the good and the bad of it, really, without going, this is good, this is bad, The word nuance, like you say, I think is just so important and gets so lost in all these political debates, doesn't it?
Yeah. I heard Brady chatting the other day because she also has some experience in this field. It was really interesting to hear her. She was talking about stripping. When she was talking about, I thought, oh, Jesus, you really understand men. It's given you another window that most of us women don't look through to sort of judge the psyche of men. And I found it really fascinating.
I hope that comes across in Alma a bit as well. And again, there's so many different types of people, isn't there, that you meet. But there is an element of that loneliness and that desperation sometimes, which I think, you do see in that. But I just wanted to present lots of different cases, rather than just say it's all this or it's all that.
Yeah.
Or, just kind of be as open to many different things as possible. And I think the clients are very human. In it. They're clearly, human beings, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Even though they're very small kind of vignettes that you see with the escorts, you can see that they're full characters with feelings and all sorts going on themselves,
I have to say, it did really make me laugh when you stole the dog. And you were... now see, here's a question. You were in your bra and pants in that scene. How comfortable are you doing that? How does that feel for you?
The bra and knickers doesn't bother me, but the sex scenes, can be more difficult. These were often comedy scenes, so they were often easier. But there's the odd one that I found quite vulnerable and difficult. But I asked for a closed set, which I didn't know you could do at first. And then I found out you could do that, and that made it a lot easier rather than having sort of 60 people staring at you. So that made it a lot easier. But the bra and knickers is probably the least of the worry. It's all the actual sex stuff that's a bit intense, isn't it? But you do just get kind of into it because it's funny when you're the writer because you write all this stuff and then think, but I'm doing this I've got to act this, but then you don't want to pop out of it, So, but it'd be interesting to know how other female writers that star in stuff, Rose Matafeo, Aisling B, Mae Martin, they've all had to do sex scenes recently, haven't they? So I'd be really interested to see how they found that process, writing it for themselves and then having to deliver it, because you can't be annoyed with the writer because it's you.
Yeah, I heard Sharon Horgan talking about this. I don't know if I don't know if it was in an interview that we did or if it was in an interview that somebody else did. But she was saying the only way that they could really get Catastrophe made like that was to play those roles themselves, because then they could push it that far, because they knew that they would do it, and that another actor wouldn't say no.
And I think with that scene, because it's quite a dark scene there about, consent but again, wanting that to end, like you said about the dog, wanting that to end with the fun, because these women are not to be victimised on screen for me. It's not about going, look at these poor victims, actually the ballsy as hell. Do you know what I mean? They'll fight back, they'll steal the dog, they'll have a laugh about him in the car, and they'll move on. So I think I wanted to show that like kind of culture between other escorts as well. Like when they're in the car on the way there and they're having a laugh together, two of them talking about another client they'd had. I think that's such a kind of common thing with escorts, to kind of have that bond and banter between each other and to be able to laugh at everything, and almost it's like they're doing a stand-up gig together. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're able to really have a laugh. I think that I really wanted to show that bond, and that's how a kind of coping strategy with the job is being able to laugh about it. And then at the end of that episode, when Alma says to Leanne, I'd like to laugh about it with you, because that's a key bit, I think, for escorts, is being able to laugh at the madness of the experiences, and not becoming the victim. It's something I really wanted to show, that resilience and humour.
Yeah, that leads back to the conversation about being working class, about the North, about a lot of those things is you have a kind of defensive thing of, don't pity me. And when I say you, I mean one, and I mean me as well.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Don't pity me.
And then that comes with the humour. That's why we're so funny, because that's a survival technique. You don't want people to feel sorry for you. Go, oh God, and you don't want to depict things, and I think that's the thing when you've had experiences, like what's in Alma, is to depict those. You depict them with joy and optimism and humour, because actually that's how you've experienced them. Even though there's been a lot of trauma and sadness and different things, the ultimate resource is humour, isn't it? I think. Yeah.
Well, that leads me to addiction, which I have talked about quite a lot, because my dad was an alcoholic, and I've talked to a lot of other children of alcoholics since he died. Well, I mean, you'll understand this. There's a kind of interesting dynamic that you have with the addict while they're still alive, where you feel like you're the keeper of their secrets, and then when my dad died, I felt I was able to talk about it more. Every single one of them has told me a story in which they are like crying, laughing. And I think if somebody else walked into the room and heard this story, they just wouldn't understand. Episode 6 of this, because obviously Lynn is addicted, and that's bubbling under the surface. And then in episode 6, this explodes. And I have to say, Sophie, I found this to be a very powerful, very moving episode. A lot of the conversations Alma has when she's talking to her mum through the door, although heroin and alcohol are very, very, very different things, actually, the excuses you hear back are almost identical. Identical. And the sort of the things that you say. So I think it's really, really important, because Alma says herself, nobody understands this. How do I explain this to people? Nobody understands it. The representations of addiction that are out there, how accurate do you find any of them? And what were you trying to achieve when you talked about addiction here?
Well, I think, first of all, felt really passionate for a long time about humanising the addict on the screens, because I've never seen that many fur depictions. So, first of all, about humanising that person, showing why they're funny and lovable, and showing why actually you want to fight for them. And then in the last episode, for me, showing how they then let you down, and how again, about the nuance. They're not evil, but actually they're no fucking good sometimes. Do you know what I mean? And that whole relationship you have, because they're like a child that you want to look after and support. And you see how they've been screwed over by a system or whatever. But then in a way you take too much responsibility for them. Ultimately, not always, but often they'll let you down.
Yeah.
Again, I wanted to show both sides of that, and actually just show the effects of an addict on the whole family system. Alma says about how do you grieve for the living dead? If someone dies, you can put flowers on the grave and people understand it, and you've got this self-contained space for your grief. I think that's the hardest thing about being in a family with an addict, isn't it? It's because it never really ends. So you're in a permanent state of kind of grief with that person that can be quite a difficult space to be in. So I think that was important for me. And then also for the parent of the addict. I mean, we don't get to see them depicted fairly often on screen, I don't think.
No.
Often they get blamed. I wanted to show the blame that social workers and systems they put on you. I mean, they're always blaming the family. Yeah. I mean, I get blamed as the daughter of an addict by people at my mum's hospital. The social workers, the way they speak to me sometimes is like, I'm the parent and I've let her down. I wanted to show that the whole system is kind of up against these people,
And it's interesting you say that, because they are like a child a lot of the time, and you need to talk to them like they're a child and treat them like a child, but you have no authority over them like you would a child. No.
When they're off and it's wild, it's crazy, isn't it? It's really, really tough and really unpredictable. But then again, like you said about showing the humour in it, but because we normalise it, because we've got that base as normal, then the humour is more accessible to us. So I suppose that's what I wanted to do with Alma's. Quickly make my mum a normal person for them to be engaged with on the screen. And then from there, they would laugh with her, they'd cry with her, they'd feel angry with her, they'd be sad when she makes a mistake. So they're invested in her in a way that most people in society are not invested in people like Lynn. So I think that was important for me.
Do you think people will get Lynn? Do you think people will see her as a sympathetic character?
I feel like they do. I feel like the response I've had is that they do get her. I think obviously Siobhan Finneran, so as much as we've done makeup and got the teeth in, she's still not quite, how heroin addicts quite look, So that's probably a bit more digestible for people, the fact that she doesn't quite look like an actual real heroin addict, But also because of the comedy and the colour of the show, I wanted it to be really bright, and have loads of one-liners, and actually we put the camera on Lynn so we can see her anxiety, we can see her vulnerability. I think all of that's accessible for people. So I think they will get her, actually. I think that for me is one of the most important challenges is can I get people to love and invest and understand this character that often in society is demonised and feared,
Stories of Care, the project that you're involved in. Can I hear a bit more about that? How you're, I was going to say giving back, but that is the right word, I think. You're sort of trying to bring some other people along with you, which is, again, an incredibly laudable thing to be doing.
Oh, thank you. Well, here I go again. Oh, thank you. With Stories of Care, I founded in 2015, and it basically is for care experienced people to do like a 20-week writing course. We develop a children's anthology that is then published and then goes out to children in care. The idea with that was basically, having people who have actually experienced things be the people behind the stories that are written about them. So a kid in care can read a story that might be about a hedgehog who's living with their grandma or whatever, but they also know that the writer is somebody who was in care themselves, So I think it's about the whole process of it being care experience led. And those participants that we work with, we do like creative and professional development over several years. So the last participants on the last project, some of them are now actually company members, producers on it, company producers. So they get a wage and they now work for the company. Production assistants as well. We're about to set up another strand, which will be a comedy strand, where I'll get people basically in the room to talk about their ideas for writing comedy scripts, care experienced people, and develop the first pilots with them.
That's amazing.
That would be great for me. I'd be really excited to see new voices coming through and see how I can support them to tell their stories in the future, so that we do kind of have a different industry, On Alma, I did a training scheme with care experienced people. So it's a paid training scheme, which for me, it's got to be. I don't believe any scheme of the volunteering participants, even the participants on Alma are paid a wage, because you can't expect working class people to be involved in a project if they've no money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that thing of not economically supporting the project. I've never understood it.
Sophie, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you.
You too.
I'm just going to say it one more time. Alma's Not Normal. Everybody should watch it.
Oh, thank you very much.